in our case, we thought, look, we have a pretty fantastic idea. We know we can manage the money. We know we can attract the backers. It's just going to take a lot of work.
So welcome, Season 4 Relentless Life on Your Terms with another very special guest, Megan. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So Megan, you've got a very interesting story. Now we share a few things. You're in the financial services sector, which you started a company. But before you actually started your company, tell us a bit about your journey and what made you start your company.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Perth, actually. I've only been in Melbourne probably about 7.5 years now. So my parents were refugees from Iran. So I was first generation, sort of born in Perth. Always had a really strong affinity to numbers and data and maths.
Very left brain.
Very, very left brain
Like
person. Yeah, so that just really naturally attracted me to financial services as a career path. So I actually started out in stockbroking. So I worked for a stockbroker in Perth for a number of years, trading some really small, specky mining names, really just learning everything about the stock market from some absolute characters as well. And just really learning and, getting a love for the financial markets and equity investing and really seeing, what a great potential to generate wealth and really build a career in that area. So moved from stockbroking over to the asset management side. I felt it was a much better fit for me. I wanted to be the one actually making the decisions rather than just sitting around doing the trading.
Outcomes.
Yeah, to actually do the analysis, decide what to buy and sell rather than spending all my time just doing the buying and selling.
Makes sense.
So I moved over to the buy side. I got a job at IOOF where I was managing Australian, global, large cap, small cap, but all really on the quantitative side of the fence. And this was something that really attracted me, having that affinity to maths, having that affinity to that really analytical side, things that make sense, things that are evidence-based. So that was really my introduction to the world of quantitative investing. And that's really been what's defined my career path in that area. Really wanted to progress my career beyond the limited investment set available in Perth. As you'd know, it's probably not the biggest investment market in Australia. It's Sydney or Melbourne, so that really prompted the move to Melbourne. Worked with IFM investors for a number of years. They're one of the biggest institutional asset managers in Australia, very well known for their infrastructure investments, probably been in the news a fair bit in the last couple of weeks. Again, quantitative equities, just really focusing on working with some of the biggest pension and super funds in Australia, global sovereign wealth funds, and really working with them to build and execute equity investment strategies. So that was sort of the pathway, all working in big businesses, very large corporations. And the sort of genesis to step out and start Blue Orbit really came from seeing this opportunity and this gap in the market. And that working within a big organization, you do have a lot of constraints. There are things you can't do. There are things that aren't economical to do in a big business, that are difficult to do, with the constraints that are in place. So you really see these opportunities come up that you're just not in a position to actually take up. And saw a pretty fantastic one in terms of really focusing on the small cap segment of the market that wasn't really getting a lot of attention. So a great opportunity to build a fantastic research process, and no one else is really doing it in Australia. So that was really the founding idea that led to the start of the Blue Orbit business.
Blue Orbit business. Tell me a bit about Blue Orbit business.
Yeah, so we're a systematic equities fund manager, so focusing on the small cap segment of the market. So we're an active equity investor, so we're actively looking to pick the best portfolios of stocks that we think will outperform the market over the long term. So when I say systematic, I use systematic and quant pretty interchangeably. It's really just taking a very scientific, evidence-based and data approach to investing. So really trying to take a lot of that bias out of the investment decision-making process and really just focusing, what does the data say? What does the evidence say? How can we build something that will continue to outperform over the long term?
Data always stands the test of time because you can argue a lot of things you can't argue with hardcore maths or data, can you?
Yeah, look, completely. And for me, that's always been my background. That's what's always made sense to me, through my studies, through my career. To me, it really made sense in terms of utilizing this as the best way to invest. You can't argue with the data. You can't argue with the evidence. And for us, a lot of people aren't doing it in small caps because, the data's hard to get. The data's hard to interpret.
Define small caps for my audience.
So it's a little bit different depending on which market you're looking at. So in Australia, we talk about the small ordinaries. So companies generally between, say, about 100 million up to about potentially 1 billion market cap. So we call them small cap, but they're still reasonably sized. When you go globally, small caps are actually a lot larger globally. So when we're looking at our global universe, again, the smaller ones might be down at the 100 million mark, but the largest ones are actually up to about $12 billion, and it's still a small cap. So a lot of the time, these segments of the markets potentially not being looked at by as many analysts. There's not much data out there, so it can be a lot harder and a lot more expensive to do. Yep. But we really think the rewards are there for people who have the skills to actually go and look for it.
Look, first of all, I love anything to do with maths. Being left brain, I love that a fellow left brainer talking to you. And I do want to ask a few questions, and I think financial literacy is super, super important. It's been a passion of mine for almost 25 years. But I always love, and I hope you don't take this wrong, females that understand it so well. And it's a company that my wife started as we were talking before, Women in Wealth, because I think it's such an important, not for females, not for males, but for everybody. And I think it's such an important thing. Are you seeing a higher take-up rate in women being more interested in these numbers or in investing?
Yeah, so you'd probably be pretty aware that investment management is one of those areas where there's generally really poor gender representation.
Yep.
There's been a real focus on it, and I think a lot of that push has come from, we've seen the super funds really pushing to increase board diversity, to increase the number of women in management of ASX companies, and really the next focus is coming to be on the investment management side. So there's a lot of value in having a diverse opinion at the table. I mean, we're investors. We talk all day about diversification. It's a real no-brainer.
And it's so important. Women live longer. They have smaller super balances.
Yes.
And also, I always say too, if you look traditionally, females and males have so different skill sets. Why not bring them both together? You're going to get a difference of opinion, and it's going to help in so many areas. So being underrepresented, I think it's only going to help the decision-making process so much more, but it's also bringing that education to the forefront. And what we're seeing, or what my wife and her mother-in-law are seeing, who start Women in Wealth, is you're seeing a bigger focus and attention on that now, which makes me so happy, because I've actually, as we mentioned, I've got 3 daughters as well, but it's such an important issue for everyone to know. And I love seeing people take an interest in it, because you sometimes, and I've seen in the case, it's people take an interest in it maybe at 55 or 60 when it's not, you don't have enough time to react or to leverage your years ahead of you in the workplace.
Yeah, look, it's so important. And this is actually something that I'm really passionately quite interested in progressing is women's interest in financial markets, in financial literacy, in investing generally, definitely in superannuation, but also younger people generally. I think there can be a lot of, as you said, disengagement until you get to a certain age. And at that point, you've lost so much value, like the time value of money and compounding.
To compound or to
can't be underestimated. So
of course.
I'm really looking to encourage, where I can, women to actually, pay attention to this and pay attention early. And I'll find, even I'll speak to people in my age bracket, professionals, buying a house, generally, building up decent savings, and are just starting to look at investing. And a lot of the time, they might not know where their super is or have paid any attention to it. So it's really important. I just think for a lot of people, it's maybe not as exciting as it could be. When they think of investments, they think of gambling in the stock markets. They think of,
quick returns,
Bitcoin, things that are exciting. They think it's almost that gambler's type excitement when they think about investing. And super, it just seems so far in the future for so many people that it's not as exciting.
It's about strategically planning, but I always think it's also out of sight, out of mind. Because when I speak to a lot of clients, very few know their super balances. A lot of them don't know what their gross income is. A lot will know their net. But I always say, take an interest in that, because the ability that you can have to use that super, whether it be in a self-managed super fund or invest that money in whatever, you actually can use that over a 5, 10, 15, 20 year period and really build leverage and compound that. But it's actually a really keen, I always find it fascinating. People go, oh, I'm not too sure. And we try to put that in the forefront of their mind, because you can actually use that money. People go, oh, it's 10 years down the track, 20 years down the track, 30 years down the track. But imagine if you actually use that time to your advantage.
Oh, completely. And I think that's why I really try and initiate conversations with younger people, because the value of making even a small change now can have such a huge impact in the future. So if you waited 10 or 15 or 20 years, you'll have to make much larger moves to actually try and make some of that money up. Whereas if you make a very small change now, the time value of that is just massive. As
And
you go
that's
into
due to the
future.
compounding effect, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. So
And imagine having money knowledge as well, understanding to investing, saving, plus the compound, really puts you in a much better position. So you're seeing a higher take now with females taking a bigger interest in their finances, in their retirement, in their investing?
yeah, which I think is really important, because as we've seen, a lot of women are getting to retirement age and having insufficient super, retiring into poverty, retiring into homelessness, being in a position where, their partner might pass away and they've never been involved in the finances. And I think that being more and more publicized is making people think, all right, well, I actually need to take control a little bit earlier, because it's not just about making money. Having financial independence is independence. It gives you the power to, potentially leave a bad job, potentially leave a bad relationship, to actually have control over your life and your future and not be tied to something out of financial necessity. So I think it's so important.
I love that. I'm actually a big advocate too. I do a lot of work for the Vinnies, and a heartbreaking statistics is the fastest growing cohort is single females over the age of 55 become homeless. It actually devastates me, because
Shocking.
To have that, to do everything right in your life, or to be married or not have a career, and then that's your reality. Could you think of anything worse?
Yeah.
And it's bad for anyone, but a single female of that age, it's the fastest growing cohort. The more times I say that, the more it's just devastating. And it's all comes down to having that education, or having someone to say, hey, you can look at a few things. I talk a bit about it in my book. I call it ostrich financing, where they just put your head in the sand. She'll be right, or I don't really worry about it. And no one's actually sat down and go, you know what, you can look at all these different options. So I always encourage, when I'm dealing with clients, I don't care who the income earner is. I said, I want you both to understand this pretty well, because it's equally as important. Touch wood, if something happens to one, you get hit by a bust, you're building a life together. It doesn't matter who the income earner or the main income earner is. I want you both to understand what's going on, because it's so important.
It is, yeah. And that's actually really fantastic to hear, because I know a lot of the times, and maybe not to speak badly, but I have seen situations where financial advisors will only focus on the income earner, or only focus on the male in the relationship, and and then the female doesn't feel included, doesn't feel spoken to, doesn't feel like she has that trusting relationship, and then disengages, and then you get to the situation where they just don't have that engagement and control, and kind of feel pushed out of what is effectively family income,
which is what's theirs. Big mistake, but also wrong, because you've got to look at two things. A, that person's very influential in that decision.
Yes.
B, that income is earned for both people or the family. One could have, and if something happens to the person that controls or understands the finances, you want the person to understand what they're trying to build that income for. And I've always made it a point of mine, doesn't bother who the one income is or the highest. I want them both to be involved, and goes, oh, he does all the finance, she does all the finance. That's okay, but I want you guys to have a basic understanding of how it works. It's important for me that you understand it because of A, B, C, D reasons. And also, I want you to know how we're performing, what we're doing for you as a couple. And also, if something was to ever happen, it's knowledge that's invaluable that your family needs to know. But
Completely.
it's not, which is, I love hearing that. I don't hear it enough, so it's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, I've actually been to, as a couple, I've been to a financial planning session where, I wasn't really talked to as the primary person in the room, despite being, the actual, financial expert in the room. So I found that quite amusing. And I think it's just, people have biases and stereotypes when it comes to these things, but it's always funny when it happens to you.
You've got to put that all aside, because if you're there to serve the client and help the client, a couple is a client, regardless of the dynamics. And also, too, I think it's silly and remiss of someone to think, even if someone's on a lower or not on an income, that they don't have an influence in that decision.
Completely.
And also, you're not doing your duty of care to explain it to both people. I've actually had people go, no, that person does the decision. I'm going, can you, for me, just sit here because it's important to me that you're both here?
Yeah.
And they go, really? I go, yeah. These are some of the reasons why. And yeah, as I said, I'm very biased towards both people having that education. Obviously, having that brand as well, both for couples or women, helping women independence, which is a growing market, and I think it's such an important market that should gain traction. I think it's actually the fastest growing market, because they're realising, hey, I need to realise we are living longer. I do have a smaller super balance, and usually it's because they were out of the workforce. In most cases, they're the primary carer of the family, which means they're their work life history won't be as long, and they have less opportunities. So all these factors have to be considered.
Yeah, completely. And I think it's really important, again, for if women are in a position to actually have those decisions, those conversations earlier in life, while they're still working, before they're potentially thinking about taking time out of the workforce, they might be in a position to sort of help set their investment preferences so they can actually serve themselves through the long term.
And they might make different decisions as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, I've got to ask you, tell me a little bit about Blue Orbit. Why did it start?
So look, Blue Orbit, myself and my co-founders, we were working together at IFM Investors. And like I said, we just saw this opportunity. We had clients coming and asking us about, can you do this in small caps? And we just weren't in a position to do it. It wasn't sort of economical within that bigger company structure to focus on something that's generally much more limited capacity.
Yep.
I mean, you can't manage billions of dollars in a small cap strategy. Generally, in Aussie, you're lucky if you can manage $1 billion. So for a very big company, it's not necessarily economical to focus research resources on something that needs a lot of time and effort. Whereas we were looking at this and we're saying, look, we think we can actually do a pretty fantastic job if we focus on this area. We have the skills, we have the knowledge, and no one else is really doing it in this way. The majority of fund managers that you'll see in small caps are sort of stock picking, fundamental type managers, and they're, the good ones are, a lot of them are full. And there's not really anyone out there taking this systematic quantitative approach to small caps. So look, we saw an opportunity. I think for me, I've always been very measured and careful in assessing risks in many ways.
Part.
Very left brain. And again, from my background, that real focus for myself on, making sure of financial security. So starting your own business is obviously a risk, but I ran the numbers and I thought it was a risk worth taking.
I know you ran the numbers.
100% ran the numbers. Because, at the end of the day, you, like any investment, you have to take a risk in order to get a reward. And for me, it's been a pretty fantastic learning experience. Like I said, I'd never started a business before and then dived straight into what's probably one of the most regulated, compliance-heavy, reporting-heavy, scrutinized industries.
And
with
it's
a
keep
lot
going
of
that way
overhead.
as well.
Yeah, and it just gets more and more. So, it's not like sort of starting a lot of other businesses. There's a lot of restrictions to be able to operate in this space. And generally those are quite high barriers to entry in terms of starting your own boutique, unless you have a lot of money, which we didn't. But I think in our case, we thought, look, we have a pretty fantastic idea. We know we can manage the money. We know we can attract the backers.
Yep.
It's just going to take a lot of work.
It's becoming a lot more challenging too, because we use IOOF to one of my financial planning firms. CHC Planning Solutions, my partner's the actual financial planner there, and it's becoming even more so compliant. It's getting tougher for people because they need to study more, and it's getting such a hard industry. But I think that's a good thing because it separates the people that are really serious about the industry, that love the industry. If you're going to study to that level again after being in the industry, I think you're going to get a really good, it's going to limit the amount of financial planners or the advice, but I think the quality is going to increase exponentially of the advice given to the consumer, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, and I think there's been so much focus on it lately, and you'd know just as well that there's, continuous change in regulations, education requirements. Obviously, there's a quality of financial advice review going on, so there's a lot of focus on this area.
It's great.
And look, it is great, and I think there's a lot of focus going on in terms of how can we come up with better outcomes for consumers, how can we, prevent issues and fraud, and one of the current things that you'll see in the media a lot is around on marketing disclosures for fund managers, very topical right now, making sure that, what fund managers are actually out there saying isn't misleading because, at the end of the day, you actually have to be able to deliver what you're saying in your marketing materials. So
you don't want it to be biased either advice.
No,
and it's to be fully disclosed so people understand exactly your interests.
Completely, but at the end of the day, it is quite a challenge to start up a small business in that kind of environment.
Yep.
You really have to be on top of everything that's going on, and I think a lot of the areas where we maybe weren't experts straight away, you learn pretty quickly.
Or you're forced to level up straight away.
Forced to learn very quickly.
But that's good though, because you got a lot of, and it's, I guess you mentioned that it's a big player field. You've got the big banks, big people that have massive funds that you're competing against, but it's good to have people that have to do that research and to build companies. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and I think, we saw a few advantages for us is that ability to be both focusing on technology and data and systems in a way that...
you're more nimble?
yeah, definitely being more nimble in that area. Because I think what we've seen is that in a lot of other industries, there's been huge disruption caused by, technologies and systems and automation and data. It's replaced a lot of jobs and a lot of people in other industries. So, I think financial services is potentially, a new frontier for that, in that we haven't seen that same level of adoption.
Disruption and growth?
Yeah.
Look, the job part, I guess I'm not a fan of that, but getting the data, like that we are a fan of, which is irrefutable when you're investing. You want good data, because you can base a smart investment decision on good data when people are putting their money, and the fact that you're putting accountability on that, which is fantastic. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. What's one of your biggest lessons you've learned from starting your business?
So this is an interesting one, and I think I kind of knew it a bit in corporate life, but it's really come to the fore in being in my own business, and that you're not going to get very far without a good network and without asking for help and without actually kind of building those relationships, because it doesn't matter how smart you are, you can't really study your way into having a good business. So it's really, really important to build and maintain those networks, and not just to help the business succeed, but to help you personally as well, because it can be really isolating, it can be really
Lonely.
tough.
Your
Very
network
lonely.
is your net worth.
You need them, yeah. And even if it's just an emotional support group who, other entrepreneurs who understand the struggle. So I think it's so important to build that up and maintain that through the process, because you can't do it alone.
Because we're Cub members, Club of United Businesses, a shout out for fellow entrepreneurs that want to join. You'll meet great people like Megan as well, and other entrepreneurs. And it is good to share ideas and stress test it, because it's just good talking to other entrepreneurs. And I've always said it, and it's always been heard so many times, your network is your net worth in so many areas.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, actually. I might steal that. Yeah, but that's been so important.
You can, so I've heard it many times. It's
yeah, repackage it.
Yeah.
So that's been really important throughout the process. And, it might feel like sort of taking the easy way or the shortcut to kind of network your way to success, but I actually think it's the most important thing, because you're not going to get there on hard work alone. You
100%.
really need that help.
Hard work's the core foundation of anything, but if you can get to somewhere quicker and you can get better information, I think it's our professional duties to ourselves and our clients to get the best information possible to build a better business. It's definitely our obligation to our team members as we're expanding our team, but also for me, it's my number one goal is to keep upskilling, and I see it as my obligation to not only my teams, but also my clients, because you want to be able to give better quality advice, you want to be able to give more options to your clients, and if they're paying us for financial services, I think it's our duty to keep upskilling. And the way you're going to do that, go around great people.
Yeah, completely. And yeah, definitely on the upskilling side, for us, one of the things we're really focused on in our process and strategy is constant improvement. Yep. So we don't just sort of build a strategy and say, yep, that's great, it's done, move on.
It's not a set and forget.
No, it's definitely not that. So there's a huge investment in terms of, okay, it's good, but it can always be better. Or is it working, or is something changing in the markets?
It's stress testing everything.
Constantly, every day. And for us, that research is such a vital, value add in terms of our process. And a lot of our ideas we get through, the day-to-day looking at the markets, but also through talking to other people, getting ideas, having discussions. So having a really strong, diverse network to field ideas from actually really helps the business itself.
Now, off topic, but I have to share it with you because I read it.
Okay.
You're a fellow very scared of heights like myself. Now, last Friday, very interestingly, last Saturday, first thing in the morning, I was supposed to skydive.
Oh, really?
Yes, because I don't like heights. So I have bungee jumps. I don't like height in dentists. So when I was in Thailand, I went to the dentist for 6 hours, and I go, you know what? I pointed at this brochure at the back of a cab, and I go to my wife, I'm going to go here. And I go to take him here. He goes, you're going to bungee jump? I've always wanted to do it. I've had no time. So I bungee jumped, then went to the dentist. And I've done a lot of things, but I haven't skydived. So I was supposed to go last week. The weather wasn't good on Saturday, but I have booked it to go back again. Tell me about that experience and why you did it.
Yeah, look, it was pretty terrifying. I think heights is one of those things where it's a phobia and it's irrational, but it doesn't really impact your day-to-day life, so you kind of just ignore it. But I think every now and then you want to have that feeling that, okay, I can...
That adrenaline?
Yeah, well, more just a case of, I can get over this if I have to. I'm the master of my phobia, not the other way around. So look, it was a bit of a whim, and then, it
When
was
was
really, oh God, it's probably 5 or 6 years ago now. So we went in Jurien Bay in Perth, which is gorgeous because you
Wow.
land on the beach and it's absolutely stunning.
I can't wait.
And yeah, it's expensive, and after a point it's non-refundable, and then you're committed, and then you go. And yeah, it actually, the hardest bit was when they opened the door of the plane and you're like, oh, this is a terrible idea. Why am I doing this? But once you're actually out, you'll love it. It's great.
You know what? It's confronting those fears. I remember doing the bungee jump, and I'm going up, and literally, I could see my heart pound, and I go, "There's no way I'm going to come down." I couldn't do it. I go to my wife, do you think I'm jumping? She goes, I know 1,000% you'll jump. I go, there's zero. I'm either going to have a heart attack or I'm jumping.
Yeah.
And the guy killed me. He goes, don't look down. And I looked at him like, I've got to look down now. Count to 3 and jump. And I'm jumping across because it's so tightly wound. Gets to the run. I look at him. He goes, don't look down. I felt like grabbing him and throwing him with me. 1, 2, I just jumped on 2 because I had to do it. But I was literally... I could see my heart pounding. Yeah. So I can't wait to skydive, but I saw that
You'll
and I go, wow.
You'll probably find it easier. I don't think I'd be able to bungee jump. I
was terrible. I can tell you, going up. Are we almost up?
There's so much build up. I think, that'd just be too hard. At least with the skydiving, someone else throws you out the plane. So
I'm going to throw them out, I reckon. Now, Megan, I've had an absolute ball, and I've learned so much, and I could talk about finance all day. I can talk about women, financial independence, so that's definitely a topic. So thank you very much. We've learned so much. This is a part of the podcast. Now I'm going to ask you a couple questions and quick fire questions.
All right.
First thing that comes to mind, shoot. But before we do that, I told you, tell me something no one knows about you. So we can get into the mood for the quick fire questions.
Okay. That's a tough one. Let's see. Probably something that only a few people know.
Yep.
Don't know that there's anything that no one knows. I am a very big devotee of horror movies. I'm obsessed with horror movies. I have seen many of them many times. Probably Sinister is up there. Also a fan of Hereditary. If you've seen it, it will scar you probably
I was
for a long
scarred at
time.
an early age. I saw Nightmare on Elm Street.
That is a classic.
I was under 9 years old.
Yep.
I never slept well
That's
for
how
a
it
year
starts.
or two.
Yeah.
FYI. So,
Yeah. Yes, but no, it's and I'm a big fan of Stephen King books as well in that same vein. I've read all of them multiple times.
I think I've shared that for a long time. My brothers and sisters used to, because I saw it, I was underage, of course. I was under 9. Though I think it was number 2 or 3. Couldn't sleep for hours. Then at night time, when my brother and sister would go past my room, they'll do their like the nails of Freddy Krueger, just so I could stay up. So that I was having nightmares for many years. So there you go. Good old Freddy. Now, what's the first thing you think of when you wake up?
How much longer can I go back to sleep for?
How do you start your day?
Coffee.
What's your favourite thing to cook?
I have my own recipe chicken, which is imaginatively called Megan chicken.
I love it. The Megan Talmage chicken, just Megan chicken. I love it. What's the worst job you ever had?
Promotions at a car yard.
That's the spirit. If you were stuck on an island for a year and you could listen to 3 albums, what would you listen to?
Music albums.
Yep.
Probably Muse, Black Holes and Revelations. It's a great album. TLC, Crazy Sexy Cool.
Yeah.
It's a winner. And what's the third one? Probably just those 2 on repeat. That's what I currently have on repeat.
I'm a big repeater. If you could work with anyone, both present or past or present, who would you work with?
So there is a pretty fantastic lady called Afsaneh Beschloss, also Iranian, formerly CIO at the World Bank and now has her own amazingly successful investment group called Rock Creek. Would like to work with her or be her, but either way, that would be great.
What's the best gift you've ever received?
Had a pretty good one recently, which was a new hammock.
I love hammocks.
I love hammocks.
Your biggest pet peeve?
Having to repeat myself.
What was that?
Having to repeat myself.
Sorry, I couldn't
You've
help
done
it.
it now.
I'm very mature. Sorry.
Too quick.
I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I can't help myself. I'm sorry. Wife thinks I'm super annoying, and she's right. I am very annoying, but I can't help myself. I'm sorry.
That was a good one.
If you weren't in this industry, so financial services, and I'm very grateful that you are, because we need as many great females in this industry as possible, what would you be doing?
Don't know if I can disclose this now, but probably now. I got very close to considering a job with ASIO,
ASIO?
the National Spy Agency.
Oh no.
But I didn't take the job, so I think I'm allowed to say that. But yes, if I hadn't taken this job, I probably would have been working there.
You've got nothing on me, have you?
I wouldn't be allowed to tell you if I did.
No. Be careful, babe. I'm watching if you've got her on me. All right, now, name a book that's positively influenced you.
I read a pretty great one recently. I think the author's name is Alex Banayan. He might be Iranian, actually. It's called The Third Door. And I found it really fantastic because it was really him taking a study into, when life closes a door, open another one.
Door.
Yeah.
What's the first two, just out of curiosity?
I think they're generally, it's more of a metaphor for the more conventional ways to kind of success or opportunity. And just after you've been knocked back and knocked back and knocked back, just try a different approach. Keep going.
I love it. I have to ask.
It was pretty inspiring, yeah.
Do you have any tattoos?
No.
What's your favourite movie?
Ooh, The Green Mile.
Green Mile. Now, if someone was playing a movie about you, which actress would be playing your part? Who would be cast?
It's a tough one. Might say, obviously, it'd probably be a bit older than me, but I'd go Penelope Cruz.
She's cool. You've shared a lot of great advice, which I'm very grateful, and so would my listeners be, so thank you very much. What's one piece of advice that you want them to really take, and if they can take one piece of advice from our discussions, what's it going to be?
I would say that it's never too early or too late to look at your finances, to know what you're investing in, and to, if you haven't already, make a start in learning about investing, because time in the market is money, and there's no better time to do it than today.
If you want to be in touch with Megan, I'm going to put all her contacts in the comments below. So please reach out to Megan or any other professionals to get financial independence. I'm sorry I spoke on that point, but it's so important. Who's your hero and why?
This is a tough one. Look, I'm going to say my mum. She's currently over for a visit and staying with me. Look,
Beautiful.
she came to Australia with nothing, no language, no money, built her own business, went back to university, has done so many amazing, difficult things in her life. So yeah, definitely an inspiration for me.
I have to ask, what business did she build? In what industry?
She was originally qualified as a nurse in Iran, but that wasn't recognized when she came out to Australia. So while she was raising 2 kids, she built her own curtain making and interior design furnishings business, which she ran for a number of years quite successfully. And then she decided to go back and restudy to get completely requalified as a nurse here in Australia, and now she works as a nurse.
Go mum.
Yeah.
Obviously a lot of patience to be a nurse, and that's where you got the entrepreneurial gene. Now, being in financial services, I know we go through a lot of stressful moments.
Yep.
What's your go-to stress management technique?
Lunchtime yoga. Highly recommend. If you're having a really difficult day, a bit of yoga will definitely help.
Do lunchtime yogurt. From 1 to 10, how much have you enjoyed the podcast?
I'll say 10.
Thank you so much for being on. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this conversation, Megan. For all you listeners out there, show your appreciation, like and subscribe to our podcast. All the details will be below. Thank you very much for coming on.
Great. Thanks so much for having me.